Hello and welcome to Ahval Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date and independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on ahvalnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to Ahval's Hot Pursuit. I'm Hala Kay. Today we will discuss the recent tensions in the East Mediterranean over an accord signed 2 weeks ago by Turkey and the UN-recognized Libyan government in Tripoli. Our first guest is Yannis Koutsomitis, the managing editor of Greek Kappa News. Welcome, Mr. Koutsomitis, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Political scientist Cengiz Aktar, a regular contributor of Ahval, is also with us. Welcome, Mr. Aktar.
Thank you.
Mr. Koutsomitis, Greece expectedly slammed the deal between Turkey and Libya, which makes two countries maritime neighbours, divides the East Mediterranean into two, and ignores the territorial waters of some Greek islands. We also know that Greece's National Council on Foreign Policy convened on Tuesday to discuss the agreement. Can you explain us how Greece evaluates that agreement and what decisions the Council made?
Well, Greece considered this action as provocative and a hostile action by the Turkish government. And it has now a plan to make this dispute an international dispute rather than a bilateral dispute between Greece and Turkey. We've seen that Greek government has sent letters to the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Security Council at the UN to inform them about the Greek position. And also they have informed the leaders of the 27 European Union countries. And today at the European Council, Greek government will try to have a very clear communique about the European Union's position regarding this dispute. So Greece's position basically is to try to have this solved in an international tribunal, especially the International Court in Hague, and this is the main aim right now of Greece to make this dispute an international affair.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Aktar, the Turkish parliament last week approved the deal. Today, in fact, the Turkish authorities said that the deal is in effect as of December the 6th. And Turkish officials say that Turkey will start drilling in expanded maritime boundaries soon. On Wednesday, Turkey's foreign minister said Turkey will prevent violations in its continental shelf. Mm-hmm. So what is the aim of Ankara? I mean, is this deal with Libya only a move to have a stronger hand, as Ankara complains that it has been excluded from plans in East Mediterranean over potentially reach hydrocarbon reserves, or is this a part of a larger plan?
Well, of course it's a part of the larger plan, and the larger plan has a name. It's called Blue Homeland Doctrine, and it is now the semi-official doctrine of the country regarding its bordering seas, Black Sea, the Aegean, and the Mediterranean. And this is just one clear application of the doctrine. As for the rhetoric, this is an ongoing rhetoric actually. Now the authorities, to start with the President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Defense, have included this memorandum of understanding between Tripoli and Ankara in their daily, I would say, threats, and that will be, that will be the new way of dealing with this issue from Ankara. That's my understanding, because the Ankara doesn't care for instance, that the Libyan parliament hadn't approved yet, and I don't think they will, this memorandum of understanding, this so-called agreement between Ankara and Tripoli, but they don't mind. I mean, for them it's done. It's yet another fait accompli, and they will act. I mean, Çavuşoğlu, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was very clear yesterday. He said, I mean, anyone who would dare to enter our, zone, which belongs to us, that is east of Crete Island, of course, and we will retaliate or we will act accordingly. So, I mean, it is I think the aggressive and the belligerent rhetoric of Ankara has now reached a higher level.
Mr. Koutsomitis, also some commentators said that those escalated tensions in the region can lead even to a military confrontation between Turkey and Greece. Do you think that things can go that far? And given that, compared to those during Turkey's military operation in North Syria in October, reactions from the EU countries and the United States to Ankara's recent move seem a bit weaker. Do you share this opinion, and what are your expectations about possible steps the international community might take?
Well, it is certainly not the Greek government's intention to increase the tensions on the field. And they will try hard until the last moment to keep this dispute on a purely diplomatic and legal level. However, if the Turkish government will try to impose, to bring, let's say, a drilling ship in an area that Greece is considering as its territorial zone, or a very in a core of its exclusive zone, then there will be big tensions, and we could have some confrontation there. But it will depend on the Turkish government's actions rather than the Greek government's ones.
And what about the reactions of the international community so far?
Well, in the first days of after the signing of the accord, there were a very muted response from international community. But since then, we've seen some increased reactions. France, Germany, the United States, Russia have all condemned the essence of this agreement, but we can't see right now how the international community will respond. My sense is that if the case is being brought to the Security Council in the United Nations, then we could have a situation where the international community would interfere. But I don't think that would happen unless there is more tensions in that region.
And has Greece received any reaction from the United States?
Yes, and I think in the coming weeks we will see more about that, especially when the Greek Prime Minister will visit President Trump in the first week of January. And we should also take into consideration in the Senate the trial of the two senators who try to push for a bill that will sanction Turkey for its actions in Syria and for S-400 purchase. So all these are I think are in the same context of trying to push Turkey into a more, let's say, negotiating table about its issues with the West and Greece and Syria as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Mr. Aktar, Erdogan said this week that Turkey may conduct joint drills with Libya, and then he added that Turkey may send troops to Libya if the Sarraj government asks for it. And so Turkey is already in a military confrontation in Syria with the Kurdish militia. Do you think that, you said that Turkey might even pursue more aggressive policies, do you think that this may even include a new military confrontation area in Libya?
But frankly, the answer is yes. Unfortunately, yes. And Libya might become yet another terrain where Turkish proxies, to start with, because there are 35,000, and they are not needed probably anymore in Syria. They might be shifted there, and there are also plenty in Idlib province of Syria. Some 40,000 more, probably, jihadists. Yes, I mean, this is, after all, a military deal between Tripoli and Ankara. But the problem is that Turkey is now already pointed at by the UN Libya Sanctions Committee as the country, among others, of course, who has contravened the arms embargo against Libya. They are openly sending arms. Now they may openly send, by virtue of this deal, accord, whatever, soldiers, but the reality of the field is quite different, because the other, Libya is more than divided. I mean, the majority of the country is held by another government, actually, the government of Haftar, the Field Marshal Haftar, and they are now openly, supported by Russia. And we are hearing news that Russia's Wagner fighters, they're sort of mercenaries who already worked in and fought in Syria, might be already there in Benghazi and Tobruk in Libya. So it's a very high risk possibility. I mean, it is definitely a possibility, because when Erdogan says something, he means it. He never bluffs, you see. We should take him to his words. But I think before going to Libya, the main aim for the time being will be the Greece's territorial waters. And so we will see in the weeks and months to come how that will evolve, whether they will attempt to start to dig for fossil fuels in the eastern shores of Crete or not, or closer to Turkey. I mean, these are all open questions. But I think overall, and this is really to recap what I'm trying to say, is that conflicts outside to Turkey are extremely important for the regime in Turkey. I mean, Erdogan needs this conflict to maintain its grip on the power. And for a very obvious reason, because the opposition and the public opinion are with him.
And also we should mention Cyprus when we are talking about those issues. Mr. Koutsomitis, last month Cypriot leaders met in Berlin to give a new chance to peace talks. Do you think that any advance for establishing peace in Cyprus is possible given the current circumstances?
Well, this is a very difficult situation for all parties involved, because obviously what happens between Turkey and Greece affects Cyprus as well, because Turkey and Greece are guarantor powers in Cyprus, and the tensions will inevitably spill over to the Cyprus issue as well. However, the two leaders of the Cypriot communities that trying to, or at least seem to try to keep the dialogue open, and we might see some delay in the meeting of the five-party meeting that should happen in later on or in the beginning of 2020. But inevitably, if tensions increase between Turkey and Greece, inevitably there will be a delay or a complete collapse of the Cyprus issue settlement talks.
Mr. Aktar, what might Turkey do in Cyprus under those blue homeland plans?
Well, I mean, there is yet another, fait accompli there, because Turkey is arguing within a framework which is not recognized by anyone else but in itself, namely the Northern Republic of Cyprus. I mean, this breakaway republic, and the entire argument regarding the exclusive economic zones, and although Turkey is not a signatory of the UN Convention which regulates the exclusive zones in the world, still argues on the basis of something which is not considered as legal by the international community. I'm talking about the Republic of Northern Cyprus. So it's already, it's adding actually more irregularity to an existing de facto irregularity since 1974. No, frankly, I mean, when it comes to Cyprus as such, I'm far from being optimistic, and I'm not the only one. The last remaining obstacle in front of a federal, in front of a Turkey monitored Cyprus, at least for the northern part, is the president, Mustafa Akıncı. I mean, there are elections in April next year, and they will do everything probably to make sure that he won't be re-elected. And that is the last obstacle. And then I think the way then will be cleared for Ankara to not officially maybe, but de facto integrate, I will quote unquote, annex the northern part of the island. I mean, this is definitely a possibility. It's in the cards. So there is only one party remaining in the northern part of the political party still talking about the federal Cyprus. All the rest are obedient servants of Ankara.
On Tuesday, there was an interesting article of Tom Ellis published in the English version of Katimorini, in which he warned the Greek media of not pouring fuel on the fire, advising them to act responsibly, avoiding populist and over-the-top statements. So, Mr. Koutsomitis, how is the Greek media covering the recent tensions, and what do you think about your Turkish counterparts?
Well, I think the press and the media, both in Greece and Turkey, are playing a very negative role in this dispute. As the Greek part of the media is concerned, there's always been a maximalist approach regarding the dispute with Turkey. And whenever someone is trying to raise a voice of, let's say, a more compromising voice regarding the dispute with Turkey, he could be as well labeled as a traitor or whatever else. This is not at all constructive, and but recently we've seen voices that are in favor of an overall deal, a grand bargain with Turkey. And the problem is Mr. Erdogan is not seen as a reliable partner to strike a grand bargain about the Aegean and the territorial waters and the Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus as a whole. So, but in overall, I think the media in both sides are acting as a tool of propaganda from both sides, from both nationalist sides, in order to maintain pressure on the other side. But this will prove very difficult, because if there is a chance for a peace settlement in the future sometime, it would be very, very difficult for any government to come up to the public and present a compromise as a fair deal, because the media and the maximalists and the nationalists will immediately try to label it as a traitor deal. So this is a very, very negative situation, I think, on both sides of the Aegean.
And Mr. Aktar, do you have any comments about how the issue is covered in the Turkish media, which is divided between pro-government and opposition outlets?
Well, the problem is that even the so-called opposition outlets, I mean, many of them either don't understand anything to these issues or don't pay attention. Unfortunately, the situation in Turkey when it comes to the media, it is much worse, because the public, already very prone to this kind of discourse, buys very, very quickly and easily all this conquest rhetoric. I mean, they are very happy, I repeat, with what is happening in Syria, and I'm afraid that they might be even more happy if something happens with Greece or Cyprus. So I think they lack. I mean, the public in general lacks information about it and about the issues, and they have just one very learned position. And this learned position is the rights and security concerns of Turkey, full stop. And there are hardly any mild and rational voices advocating something positive, and the rhetoric. The prevailing rhetoric is unfortunately a war rhetoric. I mean, it's a logic of war, and the government is very happy with it. And why I'm saying this, because in a country where there are hardly any negative and opposition voices against the ongoing Syria operation, which is clearly a conquest operation. Well, I mean, if similar things happens with neighboring countries, I mean, this rhetoric will just rejoice, and so I mean, I'm not optimistic at all when it comes to the outcome, and I agree with Yannis Koutsomitis that if one day, and that day is not for tomorrow, a deal is cut between the two countries, which is the only way, by the way. I mean, the leader who would do that will be labeled as certainly as a traitor to the interests of the nation.
Thanks both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening us. Goodbye.